Right, so DevOps Dirty Little Secret. It just occurred to me that's not me. I'm not the dirty little secrets of DevOps. So this is me. So I'm Neil Dweck. I'm a product owner, product manager for Fujitsu Uvance. I'm not going to do a big spiel, but we're developing all sorts of wonderful products for cloud transformation, and I'm particularly focused on platform engineering, but I'm actually not going to be focusing on platform engineering particularly tonight. But if you'd like to get in touch with me, that's how to reach me. I've got a lot of slides to get through, so let's go. So just want to say I'm a huge fan of DevOps. I'm here to praise the works of all these folks who have given us such a wonderful industry. Right, we're at the DevOps-Exchange. I'm sure many of you would have read at least one or two of these books. So let's move on. But first, to give this some context, I want to give you guys a brief history of engineering to put in context before we start talking about what the DevOps Dirty Little Secret might be. And so we're going to play a little game of Know Your Jedi. So put your hands up if you recognize this trailblazer who was a pioneer in space and mainframe. Anybody recognize this person? Someone nodding over there. So between the 1950s and the 2000s, we've had two types of engineer, the Type 1 trailblazer and the Type 2, the rock star. The trailblazers, as I said, were from space and mainframe, and the rock stars are, well, of internet and cloud, so we've probably got some rock stars in this room. So let me unveil one more, a Type 3 engineer that we're seeing emerging at the moment, which is an artificial engineer. So let's see if you know who these guys are. All these folks are. So, very good, Margaret Hamilton. And she, and this guy here, Linus Torvalds from Linux Recruit. Yeah. Did you recruit him? Maybe not. And Type 3, well, that's the GitHub Octocat dressed up for his Copilot activities, I think. So, as I said, brief history of engineering, 1950s to 2050, there'll only ever be three types of engineer, the Type 1s, the pioneers, the Type 2, the rock stars of the internet and cloud, and the artificial engineers. That's the way I see things anyway. So moving swiftly on to 5 candidates of DevOps Dirty Little Secrets. So candidate 1, in the beginning, Margaret Hamilton probably had a notepad or a stack of that paper that went on a dot matrix printer with the holes in on the side, and coffee. Everyone always has coffee. That's what she had to help her do her work. And then if you sort of think about the periodic table, all the tools that we now have today, if you follow the conclusion, if you extrapolate this out, there may have only been a few tools that they had at the beginning in the 1950s, literally a calculator and a piece of paper. But today we have maybe hundreds of tools. Maybe when DevOps started out, maybe there were, maybe only 20, 30 tools. But if we extrapolate this out, hundreds of tools, thousands of languages and tools and so on. So if you keep thinking about this, this is only ever going to get worse, right? So if you think about it, maybe you might know one portion of this, but your knowledge, how could you possibly now know all about all the tools out there? Not very difficult, right? So we're always finding out about new tools every day. People are launching them, people are doing very cool things, but our ability to understand this whole landscape is quite difficult. So, and also, there's also, along with all those tools, there's also different ways of working, aren't there? So there's Scrum, there's Kanban, there's Waterfall, there's Fragile for people who like pretending to do Agile, exactly, and so on and so forth. So there's a million different ways of working as well to go along with all those frameworks. So DevOps Dirty Little Secret, the candidate 1 is tool landscape and frameworks, okay? So let's move on to candidate 2. So this is Bash. Bash in 1970, and Bash today on probably an M1 laptop or something. As you can see, not much difference, not much change. So Bash now is in color, not just in green. Bash has been extended, but we're still all fat fingers in bash trying, as engineers, right, trying to make our CLIs work and getting our DevOps working. And then here's another good example of a tool. So we can't, Kelsey Hightower, very famous in Kubernetes world, talks about YAML as yet another markup language, and he refers to it as, YAML hell, I think. And we can't even decide whether there's 2 spaces or 4 spaces or is it tabs. It's quite complex and making the world very difficult for ourselves when we try and render one of these things. If a space is missing, it just doesn't work. Or your spacing in your Python file is in the wrong place, doesn't work. So this is what we're doing to ourselves. Now, there is also a whole bunch of languages out there, probably one for the alphabet. So any Rust fans in the house? Any Rust fans in the house? There's one Rust fan. A C# fan in the house? VB.NET? Anything older? Ada? Anyone know Internet Ada? No. I want to be one of those guys who's flown in to do C# in about 20 years because there's no other C# developers left alive. A bit like they do now with the mainframe people. So candidate 2 is languages and file types. There's so many languages, so many file types, just so many things to think about, right? So XML, JSON, YAML, you name it, we've got it. So let's keep going. So let's move on to cognitive strain. This is a really important topic. Team topologies, anybody know the book? Read? Cool, some nods over there. So team topologies is a big thing in DevOps and platform engineering. And what it basically says is we need to reduce the cognitive load on our teams so that they can focus on what they're doing and concentrate and focus on delivering value. And so the idea is that we try and remove that by having a platform team which provides the platform and then a team which enables the engineers to do what they need to do. So pretty cool stuff actually, and I do encourage you to read this book and think about your team structure and whether there's anything you can do in that area. But there is something to think about. Who's going to make it easier for the platform team? Because we've taken all the responsibility away from the engineering team and giving them an enabling team to help them do their DevOps work, but now the platform team is stuck with all the complexity. So my argument is, can cognitive strain be destroyed? A bit like energy, can you only transform it? You've got to pay back the debt somewhere. So I think I missed that one. Can we go back one slide? Is that possible? Did that work? Sure. Cognitive strain is the candidate for number 3. Thank you. So candidate number 4, right. The invisible $1.52 trillion problem, clunky old software. Who's worked on improving clunky old software? Who's working on clunky old software? Who's possibly developing services that are replacing clunky old software? Quite a lot of people, right? So this is a huge, huge problem for the industry, as we know. And I've worked in banks where they're afraid to touch old software, or they don't even know what certain pieces of software do, so they're afraid to even go near it. They don't have any documentation for it. This is a huge problem in DevOps because you will struggle to modernize and automate if you're very frightened to touch this stuff that's perhaps insecure. How can you shift left something that you don't really understand? So that's clunky old software. Or technical debt, as we like to call it. So I'm sure everybody talks about technical debt a lot in their systems, maybe devoting, 20% of your time to removing technical debt to ensure that you don't keep compounding it and end up in the spiral of technical debt. So quite an important one. So candidate number 5, is this the 5th and final one? This is over-engineering. Anybody have software that looks a bit like that they've worked on? A few waves. I certainly have. I may have developed a few as well myself. So a little thought, if you go and see a consultant who is a surgeon, there's a high chance that they might want to operate on you because that's what they do for a living. And a copywriter who writes copy for, I don't know, magazines or papers or whatever, will probably write everything that they do. So in the same way, what do engineers do? We engineer, and we always try and engineer ourselves out of a hole. But maybe we should be using products that already exist, that already solve this problem. And obviously there's an open source movement, and that helps, and there's libraries of code. But still, I think over engineering is a big problem. So candidate number 5 is over engineering. So we've got our 5 candidates here: the tool landscape and frameworks, the languages and file types, the cognitive strain that makes it hard to work, and the clunky old software that is holding us back from doing real work, and of course, over engineering. So I said I would reveal which is DevOps' dirty little secret. Well, each of these are compounding, I think, the overall problem. And that overall problem, any guesses what it might be? It's just one word. We all know it. We'll deal with it every day. DevOps' dirty little secret is complexity. I feel this is the biggest problem that we have in IT, in software design, and even in DevOps. I mean, just think of all those. I mean, who here is an actual DevOps engineer? Cool. And any SRE folks here today? Site reliability engineers or a developer in test? Cool. So, and just normal software engineers writing front-end or back-end services? Cool. So there's some. So you just think how many tools you have to touch to get something done, and also how much of a landscape there is to keep learning and keep ahead of. So, yeah, it's bloody difficult work, isn't it? Because it's so complex. So maybe when we started out in DevOps, this was how, we all know this infinity symbol, isn't it? Beautiful. Do we want it? This is probably how things are sort of between 2010. We've added tools in to do different things for different parts of the, software development life cycle. It's got more complex, more tools to do different stuff. We've got a lot of things around deployment or observability or logging and many different options. So if you extrapolate that out, what's to stop that from happening? Do we like the look of that? Anybody want to have 20,000 tools in their DevOps tool chain? I'm guessing not. So what can we do about it if we want something more like this? Something more harmonious and beautiful and glossy, that's easy to use and a pleasure to use, and so we can maintain the joy in work that we do. Well, how do we prevent this? Yeah, culture change. Everyone says we've got to have a culture change, but maybe with a twist. And maybe you've heard of this: people, process, and technology, this old adage. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Okay, maybe something's changing here. What happens if we add AI into this? People plus AI, with process and technology. Well, if we combine those, maybe that's intelligence. Humans and AI working together with the technology and the processes. So, older generations use Gen AI more than younger ones. That's one of the findings of a recent report, and I haven't got the quote up, so I apologise. I actually find that with my kids, who range from 16 to 21. I know I don't look old enough. And they won't use Gen AI to help themselves learn, which I find incredible. But actually, if you're using AI, there's an average productivity gain of 4.75 hours. I think that's from Copilot. And I think this one reduces stress by 79%. But these sort of findings you can see all over the web. I mean, GitHub Copilot, does anybody use that? I mean, saves a lot of time. I mean, over the last sort of 2 or 3 years of GitHub Copilot, it's massively improved from a sort of code completion tool to something that can write small snippets of code, larger snippets of code, and maybe now with the new models from OpenAI, something can write whole pages of code. But so let's keep going. So in this culture change, we need to think about augmenting our teams so that it's not just, a product manager. Sorry, I am one. But I'm still an engineer, not just a product manager and an engineer and a testing guy or a marketing person. We also need to bring AI into the frame as well so that we can work together. I mean, at this moment, you can bring Copilot into like Microsoft 365, and it can summarize your meetings and remind us which action points we need to do. This is something that was quite difficult to do before. But we could also bring those into planning meetings and just into our Scrum ceremonies. So culture change with a twist. So yes, it's probably the ultimate culture change, isn't it? Because we're going to have to begin to trust in AI. Maybe it's not going to happen overnight. That's something that we have to do. So how do we build trust in AI? Well, I think we have to codify this knowledge. There's some wonderful things out here from team topologies where we understand how flow makes its way from right through the software development lifecycle and how we can keep up the speed. And I'm sure everybody's read the Phoenix Project if you're a DevOps person. If you haven't, definitely read that. And then there's this recent book's pretty cool, which just makes so much sense about how you wire your organization for success. I don't get any royalties, by the way, they're just books that I like. And then there's Dora. Are people familiar with Dora? Cool. So Dora.dev, 10 years of research now, a decade of research. Just look what it says at the top. Capabilities predict performance, which predict outcomes. So what it's basically saying is if you do all of those things, then the likelihood of success is a lot higher. And I've definitely seen this where teams where I've focused on the Dora metrics and the capabilities shown on there, more often than not it will be successful. Where I don't, not saying things don't succeed, but it's usually a lot harder. So we can codify this knowledge as well into the AI systems that we have. Right today, it's can you see one of the top things is we all know about flexible infrastructure and document quality, really important, right, to a successful DevOps and infrastructure as code. But you can use AI to write your documentation. ChatGPT, what does this repo do? Or Copilot will help you do that. It's pretty powerful. And the same even with sort of infrastructure. Explain what this YAML file does or this Terraform file does. And you can get a level of documentation overnight that would be really difficult to do manually. So there's a whole bunch of things that we could do here through version control, through test, using AI to help us so that we're not manually staying in Bash, which is a tool from the 70s, where we can make mistakes. That's not to say Bash isn't important or YAML isn't important or GitLab isn't brilliant. That's just to say, in order to move forward, we have to get to this level of hyper-automation, and this is going to happen gradually. So the areas that I would focus on personally right now, and I'm sure people are already, are blueprints, because how many ways is there to spin up a landing zone in AWS or Azure? Probably one or two ways now. They've sort of, over the last 10 years, if you look, that's a key factor of doing work in the cloud. So we can blueprint this, we can democratize this for people, and use AI-driven DevOps tools. More are going to emerge. Things that are connected to the APIs that you already use and the CLIs that you already use and know and love. So natural language also really does break down the barrier. Who uses Git? Okay, almost everyone in the room. Right, who can remember the hash of the last commit that they did? Okay, who can remember the command to squash their commits before you push it up? Anybody? That's cool. I couldn't remember it. I know it starts with Git, and then after that, not so sure. But what if you could say with natural language Git, squash my commits and push it back to the server, please? And it says, sure, Neil, done. We don't have to remember where those dashes go and the spaces go. Is it one dash, two dashes? It's a bit crazy. So natural language can really democratize things for us and make our lives easier, because if we're doing things in natural language, we're not necessarily feeling like we're switching between tools so much. So I think that's very important. I won't go through the whole list, but I think all these things can help improve DevOps and speed things up and stop rework, stop difficult, stressy things. And obviously, we can use proactive incident management to stop things from happening. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff out there, but I think as we move into this next phase of development, that is going to be the way. So look, we're a pivotal moment in history. So here's I feel like I'm standing in a church, so I can raise my hand and sort of ask you guys to take a call to action, which is to, we're at this pivotal moment in time where we've got all this amazing work that DevOps has brought us, and we've evolved, and we're somewhere around here. What's important is that when we embrace AI, we do it in a good way, because we don't want this being in charge, right? We don't want to be this guy. So that is what I hope for the future, that you guys embrace AI, influence the future, get involved, and this has always been one of the things in DevOps, hasn't it? This very community we're in. So, so keep coming and keep influencing, and what was it I used to say? Oh yeah, be cool while you DevOps. Thank you very much.